Caves don't give warnings. One minute you're following a rope through the dark with high spirits, and the next, the water's rising, the walls are closing in, and the way out is somewhere behind you in a tunnel that all looks exactly the same. Here are 6 terrifying cave moments that were caught on camera, and every single one of them came dangerously close to not having a survivor to post the footage. Case 1, Alex in the flooded tunnel. Alex runs a YouTube channel called Cantrell Caving, and if you've seen his content before, you know the man does not pick easy caves. He's built a following specifically because he goes places most people wouldn't even consider, and on November 3rd, 2023, he took a group of 5, including his close friend Jacob, into a cave system none of them had explored before. The plan was straightforward: follow the rope, reach the end, document everything. Simple enough on paper and genuinely dangerous the moment they stepped inside. The conditions had already changed before they even realized it. Rising water was filling the narrow passages faster than expected, turning the rock floor into a slick, unpredictable surface, and the air heavy with moisture that pressed against you with every breath. They were still joking around at this point, laughing, talking about reaching the end. And that gap between the mood and the reality of what was building around them is honestly one of the most unsettling things about this clip. Jacob had scouted ahead and tried to warn them. Some sections are completely underwater and you'll have to duck your head just to get through. Still, they pushed forward, following the rope because that's what you do when you've committed to a route and the group energy is still carrying you. But the deeper Alex crawled, the more the water rose, filling his ears, pressing against his face, until the only way to breathe was to tilt his head straight up toward the ceiling and hope the gap stayed open. Then one of his friends panicked completely, grabbed onto Alex in a desperate attempt to stay above water, and nearly dragged them both under at once. Cold, dark, claustrophobic, with someone else's fear physically pulling you down. In a cave, that combination is how people die. Somehow, they kept their heads up. Inch by inch, they pulled themselves backward through the flooded passage until they broke into open space, scraped up and completely wrecked, but breathing. It could have gone the other way in about 30 seconds. Case 2, the man who almost didn't fit. This one comes from a channel called Caveman Hikes, uploaded in January 2022 under the title Smothered in a Claustrophobic Cave, which is the kind of title that tells you exactly what you're in for and still doesn't fully prepare you. The man behind the channel has posted dozens of cave exploration videos, successfully getting through tight squeezes and narrow passages more times than most people would attempt in a lifetime. But this particular passage was different, and you can actually hear the moment he starts to register that. He's talking through his options as he goes, describing how to use his feet against the ceiling for leverage, explaining the clothing bunching problem, narrating the whole thing with the calm of someone who's done this before. And then the passage gets tighter, his knee pad catches on the rock, and the talking slows down. The confidence in his voice shifts into something more careful, more deliberate, like a person recalculating in real time. At one point he admits he can't turn his head to see where his feet are, which in a cave is one of the more genuinely alarming things you can say on camera. Because if you can't see your own body, you can't fully control what happens to it in the next 10 seconds. He makes the right call and starts carefully backing out the way he came, working the leverage the same way he worked it going in, until the passage releases him back out. No injuries, no drama at the end. Just a man who understood exactly where the line was and stopped just before crossing it. That kind of judgment is what separates experienced cavers from statistics. Case 3, Lost in the Nervous Breakdown. James and Edward are the action-adventure twins, 2 brothers who've been documenting underground exploration since early 2020, and by March 2021, they had enough experience under their belts to feel genuinely confident taking on Pettyjohn Cave in Georgia, including its most notoriously difficult section, a passage locals and cavers have named the Nervous Breakdown. That name is not ironic, it is a direct description of what attempting it feels like, and on this particular trip, it delivered on that promise completely. The beginning of the trip went smoothly enough. Tight squeezes, narrow chambers, the usual physical demands of a serious cave system. About 25 minutes in, they hit a muddy chamber with a deep, narrow pit in the center that had to be skirted along the edge. One wrong move sending you into a shaft with essentially no realistic way back out. They cleared it. Then they reached the entrance to the Nervous Breakdown itself, only to find that part of the surrounding structure had collapsed since anyone had last mapped it, scattering rocks everywhere and making the route harder to identify. Edward found what looked like a viable entrance and descended, leaving James above as backup. And that was the decision that unraveled everything. The deeper Edward went, the quieter James's voice became, until there was no voice at all. No response to calls, no signal, just the sound of the cave and the growing realization that he had no idea where he was, which direction he'd come from, or how the tunnels connected to anything familiar. He spent 30 minutes wandering in near identical passages, every tunnel looking like the last one, the headlamp catching the same gray rock walls in every direction with no landmarks to hold on to. The panic he was fighting was completely rational. A single wrong turn in a maze like this doesn't just mean getting more lost. It means potentially wedging into a passage too tight to reverse out of, or dropping into a fissure that nobody on the surface knows exists. What saved him was a small piece of marker tape he'd noticed on the way down. A detail so minor he almost walked past it again before recognizing it. He followed it back, found James, and the two of them got out of the cave together without serious injury. They still explore, but they do it now with the kind of caution that only comes from having genuinely needed it once. Case 4. Bob Johnson gets stuck. In January 2014, a group of experienced cavers set out to explore Lost John's Cave in Lancaster, England, a system stretching about 3 miles with depths reaching around 700 feet. These weren't beginners. They'd planned the route, studied the maps, packed correctly, and done everything experienced cavers are supposed to do, and then they reached a section called the Tube, a passage so narrow you have to crawl through it on your stomach, partially flooded, with visibility reduced to almost nothing. The thinnest member of the group went first and made it through. Bob Johnson went next. Bob made steady progress for a while, moving through the tube the way you're supposed to, carefully, steadily, 1 inch at a time, and then he hit the narrowest section and stopped moving forward. Every attempt to push through made it worse, the rock pressing tighter against his body with each effort until he was completely wedged from the waist down, unable to go forward or pull himself back. What makes this genuinely horrifying beyond the physical reality of being stuck in solid rock is what started happening around him. The water rising in a dry passage. Being stuck is a crisis you have time to think through. In rising water, the math changes completely and the clock starts immediately. Cold water climbing up your body while the walls hold you in place is the kind of scenario that breaks people mentally before it ever becomes a physical emergency. And Bob knew exactly what was building around him. The team behind him eventually had the presence of mind to stop trying to push him forward and start carefully pulling him back the way he'd come. And it worked. He came free, but the ordeal wasn't over. The 3 of them had to crawl for another 3 hours through an alternative route before they reached the surface. Bob has said publicly that he still can't watch the footage from that day without experiencing severe anxiety, and honestly, after watching it yourself, that reaction makes complete sense. Case 5. The Swinging Chain. Jacob is an explorer who has spent nearly 20 years documenting abandoned mines, and by December 5th, 2017, he had descended into enough of them to have a feel for what normal looks and sounds like underground. He knew the difference between wind through a shaft and something else, between settling rock and movement. That experience is exactly what makes this particular night so compelling. Because what Jacob encountered in that mine wasn't something he could rationalize away, and he wasn't someone who scared easily. The early part of the footage is calm, rotting wooden beams overhead, the tunnel stretching ahead in the beam of his headlamp, the steady sound of his own movement through the dark. Then about 15 minutes in, the camera picks up something he doesn't notice in the moment. A faint flash of light deep in the tunnel, where no light should be coming from. And then the sounds start, soft, whisper-like, coming from somewhere just out of sight, close enough to hear but far enough that he can't locate the source. He stops, tries to identify it. Wind, maybe a bird, maybe something else. And the sounds stop the moment he does, like whatever was making them knew he was listening. He makes the decision to leave and starts heading back toward the entrance. On the way out, he notices a branching tunnel he hadn't explored yet and takes a brief look inside. Steel chains hang from the ceiling, the kind of thing you'd find in any abandoned mine, until he sees one of them moving, slowly, steadily swinging back and forth, as if someone had just let go of it seconds before he got there. Jacob left immediately and didn't go back. 20 years of mines, and this is the one he still doesn't have an explanation for. Case 6. No experience, no equipment, all consequences. The final entry on this list is a very different kind of terrifying, not because of rising water or getting lost in a system that has defeated experienced cavers, but because of the specific brand of chaos that happens when 3 people with no caving experience and no proper equipment decide to go underground anyway. Daniel filmed the whole thing, which means we have a complete record of how quickly a casual decision becomes a survival situation. They're underground for only a few minutes before they're lost. No landmarks, no route markers, no plan for if the headlamps run low, just 3 people in a cave that has absolutely no interest in being forgiving to the unprepared. Daniel finds a chamber thick with massive spiders and handles it with the specific energy of someone who is trying very hard to hold it together, narrating out loud that he's not scared of spiders, making peace with them, moving through anyway. Then one of his friends gets wedged between the cave walls and the group's collective composure starts to crack in real time. The panic doesn't announce itself all at once. It builds in the background of every frame, in the tightening voices and the faster movements and the way the camera starts shaking slightly. What saves them isn't equipment or training or experience. It's the fact that the cave on this particular day happened to give them a way out before the situation fully unraveled. They found the exit, got to the surface, and walked out unharmed. Which, given everything that went wrong in that hour, is the part that feels almost as unbelievable as everything else. The cave didn't have to let them go. This time it did. And there you have it, 6 moments where the outcome could have been written very differently. What gets me about every single one of these is that they all started as a normal day for the people in them. Headlamps charged, group assembled, plan in place. The cave, however, had other ideas. Which one genuinely got under your skin the most? Drop it in the comments, and if you want more of this, hit subscribe. There's a lot more darkness to explore.